Perhaps the most fascinating thing about Mechanics Institutes for me is the sheer variety of speakers and events they played host to. Maurice Vaughan, engine driver turned social commentator and educator, believed that workers were best placed to learn amongst their machines. If they couldn't find a site for self-education within the work environs, he argued, they should at least bring the machinery to them. They needed a space where they could study models, swap ideas, and solve problems together. For some, this was to help with specific tests or exams, but for many others, writers like Vaughan felt, it was under that wonderful 19th century catch-all of self-improvement. The Mechanics Institute in York, for example, was one of the bigger ones, able to maintain correspondence with the Science Museum in London and borrow from its loaning supply of demonstration equipment and lecturers. No matter the size, however, Mechanics Institute seemed to have mirrored the eclectic and hugely varied space that was working class education and leisure at the time, and the way those two things intermingled. Workers at Shildon's Railway Institute, a mechanics institute whose narrower name is just indicative of the single industry nature of that northeastern railway town, saw between 1859 and 1873 lecturers speak on the topics of manliness, Borneo, phrenology, the abolition of capital punishment, Shakespeare, Lincoln, Captain Cook, Hogarth, the poet Oliver Goldsmith, and the medical benefits of Turkish baths. This was in addition to a regular programme of industrial lectures, more specifically about the railways and the steam engines that they worked with. Organisers and audience seem to have seen nothing wrong with this eclectic mix, nor indeed was it inappropriate, clearly, for the lecture series to break and hold a one-off benefit concert for the local saxophone band in 1861. All of these and more fell under the remit of the Mechanics Institute. The other point worth reflecting upon, I think, is that Mechanics Institute seem to have rarely been one-way streets for a receptive working class audience and didactic middle-class speakers. Firstly, neither audiences nor speakers were so clearly divided along class lines. Secondly, and more importantly, Mechanics Institutes were a place where working class needs and causes and ideas came into the wider public sphere. So when, in 1901, the Bradford Women's Liberal Association had to borrow the local Mechanics Institute as an overflow venue for their meeting, a performance by the Bethesda Welsh Choir, made up of quarrymen from an ongoing strike in Penryn, helped highlight the particularly vicious nature of that industrial dispute for a wider audience. Even their detractors were forced to admit their utility as spaces where the working class could find a sort of purchase and an identity. One reverend at a Durham Temperance Branch meeting in 1904, whilst arguing that church lads' brigades and friendly societies were better venues for teaching moral virtues from the church to the audience, had to admit that reading rooms have developed into quite large and attractive clubs for workers themselves.